Psychology in Seattle.
So, Bob, I have a lawsuit case here in which a therapist was successfully sued.
No.
And as you know, I have some sort of sick pleasure about about reviewing these with you. So call it a fetish of mine. What do you say we review this case in which a therapist was successfully sued?
Sure, let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Bob?
I am apparently your fellow fetishizer. I'm a therapist in practice here in Seattle. We're old friends from school.
Do you like it as much as I do?
No, this stuff makes me nervous.
Why do you think I like it so much?
Schadenfreude? I don't know.
I mean, it's got to be a part of it. I think another part of it is similar to watching like car crash videos.
Yeah.
Is that...
Oh, you watch those, right?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or police cam videos or something. Because I feel like a part of the satisfaction is I get to see how to remain safe. Like there are certain... Like I've watched probably hundreds of car crash, dash cam videos where they witness a car crash.
Yeah.
And it's never like death because it's on YouTube. There's certain things that they don't allow on YouTube from what I gather. But there's certain things that people do that are very common to car crashes, really bad car crashes. Like a very common one is when you're in traffic, for example, and you're bumper to bumper, but the lane next to you is free, and you're stopped, and you're like, oh, I think I'll get in the other lane, and you just get over. But both people are kind of, so I learned two things. One, if I'm stopped, you really have to make sure, because someone could be moving at like 60 miles an hour, and I have to make sure that no one's really far back there. Two, if I'm driving next to one of those stop lines, I got to slow down to like maybe 20 miles an hour because I have to quickly react if someone suddenly pulls out.
Right.
So there's all these like little tips that you'll sort of pick up. Anyway, I think when I read these cases of therapists being sued, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's how you avoid that.
Right.
It also, in graduate school, when you learn about ethics and when you take continuing education, there's always this knowledge that all of us can be sued. We all have to have malpractice. Yeah. We have licenses. There's a reason for all that. And so there's this sort of amorphous threat. It's like walking into the darkness and wondering like what monsters lie beyond the veil of my vision. But if you just turn on the lights and you're like, oh, it's a frog, or whatever, it suddenly feels much more safe. It's like, oh, this is exactly what happens, and here are the consequences too. Because one of the things that I actually often learn, and I often tell my supervisees, is that even when you look at some of the more horrendous cases, the consequences aren't actually as bad as you probably think that they are. Yeah. You don't go to jail. The payouts are actually not that high.
They're small.
For whatever reason, malpractice against therapists is it's like $50,000. It's not like surgery or something where it's millions of dollars.
But you have to carry, like my policy is $2 million, $4 million.
Right.
Right. You have to carry that much.
So it makes it look like, wow,
shit.
$3 million of malpractice insurance every year.
Right.
It just seems so like it's like, well, if the fence is that far out, it must be indicative of the sort of cases that you get. But it's far higher than it needs to be. Yeah. And guess what? The insurance companies like that sort of thing, right? But so I think that it makes me feel a lot safer to actually read this. Anyway, actually, this episode is just going to be for patrons of the podcast. I apologize for going so long without mentioning that. This is
teaser.
Yeah, this is a teaser, and I'd usually have these sorts of episodes be patron only because they're technical, and a lot of therapists subscribe to the podcast. It's sort of like a continuing ed kind of thing. Anyway. So if you want to hear the full episode, you have to be a patron of the podcast by going to patreon.com. you become a patron of our podcast, you get access to this episode along with hundreds of other patron-exclusive episodes. More recently, I did 17 hours of patron-exclusive episode content on attachment theory. I really loved making those episodes, and I really thought it was really good work, but I had no idea how useful or helpful or how well received it would be. It's by far the most well received thing I might have ever done in my life.
Wow.
In some ways.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was good because it's very useful to me, but I've done other things on this podcast before, thinking it was going to be like bigger.
Yeah.
And so I learned my lesson. Like, well, you just never know, but yeah, like. The attachment series deep dive was a big deal. And I have people coming up to me and just saying like, it changed my life. Nice. And I'm not saying that to bolster my thing. I'm saying that attachment theory itself, once you really get it, it is life changing.
Yeah.
Once you really get attachment theory, it affects everything. Like me and Bob right now talking, there are attachment theory concepts that will occasionally pop into my head that will guide me in my ability to have a meaningful life, to know my own reactivity, to guess at Bob's reactivity, to tend to both of our attachment needs, which are happening all the time. And so if you want to learn more about that, become a patron and listen to the attachment deep dive. So that is that.